Our Lord Solrairon, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy trigger be done, on earth as it is on Cray. Give us today our daily crit, and forgive us for our over-triggers, as we forgive those who over-trigger against us. Amen. How's it going, YouTube? Today we've got another deck profile for you guys today. We're doing another mask deck, and we've got Solrairon Masques. So with the updates for Solrairon Masques, Solrairon definitely got a bit of a buff, nothing crazy, but the deck is a little more consistent and it has a little bit more aggression thanks to being able to give rearguards drive checks or a rearguard drive checks. So the deck is a little bit fun and you can kind of get around with some spicy plays by checking the top card of your deck and looking for triggers. But other than that, the deck is still pretty mediocre. But without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the deck profile for those who are interested in how to play the most optimal and competitive form of Solrairon Masques. And with that, let's just go ahead and jump right into the deck profile. All right, jumping right into the deck profile, we're going to start with the ride line as we always do. We're going with Strawn for aesthetic purposes, but the starter doesn't really matter. But this is the one for the Solrairon deck. We got our grade 1, which is the same from the original ride line. Elron. When it's placed on rear, if you have Vanguard Solrairon, you can put a normal unit from your hand to the top of your deck, or reveal it, then draw a card, then put the normal unit on top of your deck. When it's rode upon by the grade 2, which is Solrairon, you declare normal unit or trigger unit, and if you're right, you can put that card in your hand. If you're wrong, you can put that card into the soul or leave it on the top of your deck. So it's kind of really up to you what you want to do, but pretty much you always just like declare trigger unit, and then you're like, or normal unit, whoa, it's a trigger, it goes back on the top of my deck. So that's kind of just the gist of what you're going to do. For Stragon is when it's rode upon by a unit with Solrairon in its name, you call out itself and Elron to the rearguard circle, so you get 2 free rearguards, which is pretty cool. And then it has at the end of battle that it attacked, if you reveal the card based on your Solrairon Vanguard's effect, you can then retire it at the end of battle to countercharge 1. So that's pretty cool. So the fact that you get a countercharger out of your ride line, very nice. And also because you're going to proc Elron's ability by calling it to rear, so you get your setup pretty easily. Lastly, we got the original Solrairon. It does have some card effects, but we're never going to use any of them, so it doesn't really matter. But for the sake of knowing what the card does, we're going to go into it. So what Solrairon does, if you were ever going to use its ability, is beginning of battle phase, you Soul Blast 1, declare normal unit or trigger unit, and then you can reveal it. If you revealed the right thing, you can have your front row get 5k power, and then when it attacks, you counter blast 1, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, call 1, put the rest on the top or bottom, so you can kind of trigger manipulate. But you're never going to be on Solrairon because you're going to want to go into the mask right away. So you're only really using Solrairon just so you can go into your mask variant. Lastly, for a ride deck, of course, your energy generator. So that's pretty much it. We're going to go ahead and start the main deck going into the grade 3 normal units. To start off for the grade 3s, we have our 4 copies of the new Solrairon Masques. So Solrairon Masques has an energy blast ability where you can energy blast 3, reveal a normal unit from your hand to then draw a card and put the revealed card on the top of your deck. It also has the ability when you remove the original Solrairon, you can then declare normal or trigger unit, and if you're right, you can then get the auto ability red text once per turn when this unit when a unit is placed onto the rearguard circle by card ability, you can then have that unit gain drive checks or a single drive, basically, because it increases or reduces the drive check to 1. And since Solrairon calls stuff, you're basically going to be able to remove it, call it, give the rearguard drive checks, which is pretty cool. The final ability is when this unit attacks a Vanguard, you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you choose cards equal to the number of Dragon Tree markers that you have, and you can call them to rearguard circle, and you can put the rest on the top or the bottom of your deck. So ideally you have 2 Dragon Tree markers, you call 2 things that are normal units, hopefully, and then the 3rd trigger will go on the top of your deck, or if it's not a trigger, you can put it on the bottom, but it's always fun to fake out your opponent and leave the 3rd card on top anyways, just because they're afraid that it's a trigger and they might overguard just to be safe. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You can play some mind games with your opponent. But the goal, obviously, is to get into Solrairon Masques as soon as possible. Multiple copies for Persona Ride, so nothing new there. Then we are running 3 more copies of the original Solrairon, just so that you can get off the ability to remove the original Solrairon so that you can get those drive check abilities off, which is always helpful. And lastly, we're running 4 copies of Raiton, because he be Raiton. Look at him, all studious. What Raiton does is when this unit attacks, if a normal unit was revealed for the cost of your Vanguard Solrairon, he gets the ability that he gets 10k, and then at the end of the battle, you can put this unit into your soul. So you can fuel soul for other costs, which is really nice. It has the ability of when it's in the soul, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Solrairon in its name, you can bind this card and then choose a card from your drop zone, and you can put it onto the top of your deck. So you can pick a normal unit from your drop zone, put it on top. That way you're already set up to start declaring your effects. So you can declare a normal unit, it's right, blah, blah, blah. Or if you want, you can put a PG on the top of your deck and do some manipulation to draw a PG, put another card on top. So this card is very helpful for your setups, and it gets power. So 10k power is always really nice. So if you call it from the top of your deck, having a nice 23 or 33k beat stick with a drive check is going to be pretty cool. But that is it for our grade 3s, or normal unit grade 3s. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into the grade 2s. The grade 2 lineup is super simple. We got our 4 copies of Daishach, which is our mask horse. It searches for the mask when you place it by energy blasting 3. So right away, obviously, we want to go into our mask variant, so we'll need the Mask of Hydrogum in order to get there. It also has the act ability to Counter Blast 1, bind this unit, and then you can create a Dragon Tree marker, and then you look at the top 7 cards of your deck to look for your Solrairon mask. But if you do not have another copy of Daishach in your bind zone, you can look through your whole deck instead. So right away, you play the card, you get your Mask of Hydrogum, you bind it, you search your deck for your Solrairon mask, and you're ready to go. You got the 2 pieces you need to immediately go into the card. So definitely want to run 4 of this. It's also helpful just to make more Dragon Tree markers if you need to. We're running 4 because we definitely want to see this as soon as possible to help with our setup. And then lastly, for our grade 2 normal units, we are running 4 copies of Lectures. So this card helps you get your soul and countercharge engine, and also helps you draw some cards, which is really nice. So what this does is at the end of the battle that this attacked, if a normal unit was revealed by the ability of your Solrairon, at the end of the battle, you put it to soul, you countercharge, and then if this was placed from the deck, you can draw a card as well. So soul, countercharge, draw, very helpful resources. And then you soul blast it. You can put it back into the deck using Raiton. So there's some pretty good plays here, but the countercharge is super important to the deck. So we definitely want to run 4 copies of that. And since we're calling from the deck anyways, there's the added benefit. That's it for the grade 2s. We're going to go ahead and talk about our normal unit grade 1s. So again, since the deck wants Dragon Tree markers, we are maxing out on our ability to hopefully get some Dragon Tree markers by running Sabak or Sakab. So Sakab, when it's placed, you can blast 1, you can get a Dragon Tree marker, so that's always nice. Second ability is when it's in the back row, once per turn, when a unit is placed in the same column as Sakab, you can blast 1 to draw a card. So it's nice to have it in the back row when something swings, and then maybe you call over it with Solrairon. That way you can also maybe get a counterblast and a draw, and then you can use stuff like Lectures to move to soul, countercharge, get your resource back. But a lot of ability to draw some hand, which is nice. So I do like this Sakab, but obviously we do need to make Dragon Tree markers, so we are running 4 copies for that. Next up for grade 1 normal units, I am running 4 copies of Reedy. We are being pretty greedy with the Reedy. See what I did there? The reason for that is because we generate a good amount of soul in this deck. A lot of cards move themselves to the soul at the end of battle, or, have abilities to fill up the soul, and we're persona writing. Obviously, the Mask of Hydrogum goes to the soul when you use it to superior ride into Solrairon Masques. So with that, Reedy has the ability of Act, Soul Blast 2. For this turn, your triggers get an additional 5k power when you trigger check them. So what you can do is you can either wait, Soul Blast 4, make all your triggers plus 10k power, or you can do it proactively throughout your turns and just do, oh, my triggers are plus 15, my triggers are plus 15. And it does make your opponent have to think about their guard a little bit, because now the typical 2 to pass might be 1 to pass if your triggers are getting an additional 5. So because of that, I do like to see Reedy often. We don't really need any grade 1s to help resource build, because we have most of the resources we need from our grade 2 lineup. So I figure max out on the Reedies. We make plenty of soul, so make Solrairon as threatening as he possibly can, and Reedy is there to help with that. Lastly, for the grade ones, we are running 3 copies of our typical Keter PG, you know, the one where if you have 1 or less in hand, you don't have to discard, just like every other deck. But that's it for the grade ones. We're just going to go ahead and now jump into the trigger units. For the trigger lineup, we're going full aggro. We got our 4 Blade Feather crit because it is a crit with a effect and it moves the soul. Dropping my cards over here. Then we have our 4 vanilla crit, so we're going full on 8 crit, just like pretty much most decks these days. Then we have our all pack fronts. We don't really need the front trigger that moves the soul, so I'd rather have the shield. So all pack gets 5k shield when you guard with it, if your opponent's at grade 3 or greater. Then we have our 4 heal triggers. Nothing crazy here, just sticking with the 4 vanilla heals. And our over trigger of choice is going to be Edisfaro. So the reason that I like Edisfaro is because we're already trying to be really threatening with being able to stack triggers on the top of our deck with Solraion's effects and all the other effects of the rearguard support. So having that threat of knowing that the over trigger on the top of our deck is an additional crit means that our opponent that might be at 4 damage and says over trigger to pass, well, nope, there's the OT, there's the crit. GG. The other benefit is obviously adding cards back to your hand from your drop zone, which is the additional effect for Edisfaro. So that's always going to be nice. Grab a PG or grab some resource card that you'll need to set up for next turn. You never know what might be there. So you could also do, if you want, Valnut, because, you know, trigger your rearguard is also going to be able to perform a single drive. So maybe on the off chance that you get the Valnut OT, you give it to a rearguard, it's going to swing, performs a drive check, maybe you get a crit, so then you can restand it, swing again with a crit on top of it. Those are those added benefits as well. But it's really up to you if your goal is to go multi-tack or if your goal is to, you know, do some threats with some crits. I personally like the Edisfaro just because we can also add stuff from our drop to our hand. But that is it for the triggers. We're going to go ahead and now kick it off into our order cards. Firstly, most importantly, we have our Mask of Hydreigon. So the Mask of Hydreigon is you play it and you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and you look for a card with Dragon Tree in its name, or a card with Mask in its name. So you can look for your Sakab, your Horse, or your Solrairon Masque. And then it has the drop zone effect of if you have a Vanguard without Mask in its name, you can put this card from your drop zone to your soul and write a card with masks in its name. And if your opponent is on grade 3, you can activate Persona Ride for that turn. So for this deck, you typically want to go second, which is pretty rare for a lot of decks, but the mass decks like to go second so they can get Persona Ride first. And we only need the 2 copies because the horse searches for it. So I would say that, you know, you only need 2 because if you damage one, you search the other, and you never really have to redo your mask turn again. You just stick on Solrairon Masque and Persona Ride over and over and over. Next up for our order cards, I decided to go with Radiance Caliburn. I think between this and Fire Regalis, they're both really good options, but I decided to go with Caliburn. The main reason is because you can draw more cards if you need to look for specific key pieces that'll help with your deck. The other thing is if you need the counter charge, so that if your opponent is damage denying you for whatever reason, you can at least move Caliburn into the soul, counter charge 1, and it helps feed your soul, so now you have something else to soul blast with Reedy, which is nice. So very situational card, but I do think the Fire Regalis is also a really good pick because you can just look at the top 5, look for a card that you need that way as well. And it's still, you can activate an order from drop essentially and still play your mask if you need to. But since we only use the mask once in the whole game, at least from my experience, having another order later down the road doesn't hinder the deck or, you know, conflict with our ability to play orders. So I personally like the Radiance Caliburn. And last but not least, for our order cards, we have the Blitz Order Elementary Sanctitude. This is our 4th Sentinel in the deck. It's really good right now because we have a lot of Stride deck sets with Harry, Night Rose, and Messiah running around, as well as Lyle Odium, which gains triple drive. So a lot of decks have the triple drive ability these days, so it's good to have an Elementaria to get around that for free. But that is pretty much it for the deck profile. Lastly, of course, you got to make sure you got your Dragon Tree markers. I got my 5 just to have to put on your rearguard circles. What Dragon Tree markers also do is if you have a Vanguard with Mask in its name, the unit on that Dragon Tree marker gets an additional 5k power. So that's also really helpful for being aggressive. So you want to make sure you get your Dragon Tree markers too. if you don't have them already. But that was the last thing for the deck profile. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. Solrairon is a pretty budget-friendly deck for the most part, I would say as well. So if you're interested in picking up a pretty decent Keter deck, that's got some pretty fun, gimmicky manipulation for triggers, I would say Solrairon's a good pick for that as well. But with that, thank you guys for watching. My name is Richard, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.